Hey everyone, today we're talking about becoming informed, the history of money. My name is Isaiah Goodman, Chief Financial Advocate at Becoming Financial. So it's something we use every day. We might not actually physically touch money anymore, but for the most part, all of us somehow interact with money every day. One of the things I think we forget is, where did it actually come from? Where the heck did this money thing start, and why is it so important today? So I thought I'd take us back through the years and just kind of look at the history of money. Where did it evolve from? How did we get to where we're at today? And what does it look like in the future? We'll talk about that in a future episode. So let's go way back, like way back to when people first started. Now, archaeologists will have different dates on when they find things depending on the continent, but they generally agree that how we started was barter and trading. So you have this many cattle, I have this much grain, I'll trade you this much for that much. That's how things started. Of course, with different cultures and different groups of nomads, they would sort of do the hunter-gatherer, right? I will hunt, you gather, we'll come back and we'll all share sort of our gatherings and our hunts in sort of this community. So that's where civilization started, is you give me this much of that, I'll give you this much of this. Well, it started to have some problems as travel started to expand, right? It was only so possible to get this many furs or this much grain. So they started to say, hey, can we have some sort of way that if I give you this, you can trade that with somebody else, and it gives you that sort of value, right? Because even if you have all the meat and all the grains and all the goods that you need, you only have so much capacity to be able to move it from Y to Z. So around 3000 BC, the shekel came out, just coined, right, from gold and silver. The shekel was able to sort of provide value to say, you can purchase this good, trade this shekel for another amount of goods. Now, it's a different number of shekels, but that's where sort of this emergence of money started to show. In around 1000 BC to 400 AD, they started to see this standardization of coins. So this coin is worth this much, this coin is worth this much. It talks about it in a lot of the ancient texts, like the Bible, with coins belonging to Caesar, etc., right? That's where some of this really began, was the ability to be able to have money in a coin or a purse, and then be able to exchange that for other goods without having to carry the goods everywhere you went. Believe it or not, the word budget actually comes from an ancient word meaning purse. So that's where budget comes from, was basically all of your coins in a purse. So it's kind of neat to think about that way, and that's kind of how we help our clients budget, is how much could we essentially afford if we put it into different buckets or different purses, right? Around 11th century in China, they started to come up with bills. So instead of coins, hey, we can get a lot more value if we were to print it on some sort of paper. So as that began to sort of grow through Asia and Europe, it found that in England and Europe, they started to use tallies to be able to say, hey, if you give me this much, we'll keep it safe somewhere, and then we'll be able to come get that later for a certain amount of coins or bills. So you're starting to see where this goes. Around the 1400s, goldsmiths were some of the first bankers in the world. They were the ones who created all of the gold and coined all of the gold, and people started to say, hey, if we just keep it at your place, can you give me a note or some sort of paper or document that says, I've got this much gold at your place? Obviously, they were fortified, they were safe, and so the goldsmiths became the first bankers. And they would keep tallies and notes of all the different citizens that had a certain amount of gold or coins or bills held at their goldsmith, their foundry. So that's where some of the first bankers started to come into play. And then obviously the Bank of England and all of the international trade, as that grew, they started to have a number of different things. It looks like around 1600s, 1700s, the Bank of England started to become the first demand deposit, to where you would actually have a bank that's state-run, where they could keep your money. They started to print this currency and be able to keep sort of a standardized track. from 1700s all the way to the 1900s, you had money that was printed and based off of gold. Around the early 1900s here in the US, they went away from the gold standard to just create their own standard of money backed by the faith of the US government. So we say this money is worth this much because we say it's worth this much. And what that created in terms of banking was the ability for them to be able to lend money out in a different way. So we'll talk more about this with fractional reserve and the Federal Reserve, but essentially now with being able to print money, now you have other issues that come into play, things like inflation. So we'll talk about this in future episodes, but that kind of gets us up to today with this emergence of Bitcoin and cryptocurrencies. So some of these things now are starting to try to decentralize the monetary system. So instead of a central state like the US government having all control of the printing and managing of money, if you trade on a cryptocurrency, I can exchange something of value to you, and it's just between you and I. And of course, it's sort of documented in a secure way so that you know I got the goods and I know you got the money. So that's kind of the next step, and we'll talk about this in future episodes. What's the future of money look like in terms of, are we going to have any more printed money? Is it all going to be cryptocurrency? Will the government get into the cryptocurrency game? We'll see where it goes, but that at least gets you to this point today.